Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Leveled Loot podcast. That's right. We finally have a name. This is a Temple of Geeks video game podcast. Us three have been doing it for, yeah. Oh, that's cool. I've never thought of that. This is our monthly video game show that we will still host on Temple of Geek. We just have like our own name now to kind of set it apart. Yeah. And so I'm your host, Myles. I'm joined once again by Danreb and Kurosh. Today, we're very excited. We are pre-recording this because the embargo doesn't lift until, I believe, the 24th. This is our Monster Hunter Wilds review podcast. So this whole episode is just going to be all about Monster Hunter Wilds. Kurosh is still going to be doing a written review and I believe a video companion to the written review.
Correct.
We're in a unique spot where three of us have like vastly different experiences with the franchise. We'll get into that a bit later, but I just want to just real quick get everyone's like general first impressions about Monster Hunter Wilds. Kurosh, we'll start with you.
Sure. Okay, so I have been playing this game. I'm still playing this game. Right before this episode, I was trying to do a few things. I put in about 45 hours in total so far into this game. I rolled credits around hour 12 to 15 ish. And I've done a total. The game does a good job of tracking all of your data and stuff. I've done a total of about 85 hunts, and I'm about halfway to what I believe is going to be the platinum based off of how the game is tracking. And I can just safely say I'm in love with this game. When I put my review out, my score is going to be a 9 out of 10. I think this takes, yeah, Danreb's happy about that. I think it does a lot in taking what World built in elevating the series to a wider audience, but now refining it and bringing back so many of the elements that make the series great from other points in the series, like especially for Ultimate. And to me, that combination and streamlining and making it steps towards a better direction make this, I think, one of the best experiences I've had with Monster Hunter. As you mentioned, I've had a long history with the franchise. I've played since my PSP days with my little Monster Hunter Fest pouch. I went onto the 3DS. I got my little Ultimate XL signed by the creators. I had to put this thing in a seal, and onward. I had a Monster Hunter meetup group for 3 years that I ran and hosted. And they gave me you can kind of see it in the background, but they made a canvas for me as the village elder. So I love the franchise. I love what it does in bringing people together. It's very much in the same vein I think that Helldivers strive for that multiplayer experience.
That's a very good.
And just making it a fun time to hang out. It's not without its issues, and we can get into that. But that's high level what I think of the game and my overall thoughts.
So you are a Monster Hunter like straight up veteran. You've been around forever. I'm the complete opposite. This is my first Monster Hunter game that I've actually played. Of course, just if you're like a hardcore game enjoyer, you just know what the franchise is. That's me. I've always been aware of it, but I've never played. And I know there are some things that quality of life in Wilds that didn't really exist in the past games that people have expressed frustration with back then that are like a bit more streamlined now. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. There's definitely a pretty steep learning curve, especially if you're not really good at like dodge parry type of stuff. Um, I am really enjoying it. I got frustrated with the controls at first because like I'm so used to having like dodge on like circle or something and attack with like square or R1. It's just like it's very Souls-like in that you can put your weapon away and then you have to use your items instead of just hitting a button to use your item and then start attacking. You really have to get used to that. Once you nail it, though, it makes a lot of sense and it flows. That was my hardest thing starting. And then another thing I don't really love, which I'm sure we'll get more into, is the social aspect. When like trying to start a party and join it's not really explained or cut and dry. But yeah, as a first time Monster Hunter, I'm loving it. I can see myself playing this long term. As far as my progress with the game, I believe I'm like 23, 24 hours. I'm at the end. Actually, I don't think I could say. I think I'm close to the end of the story. I'll leave it vague. Danreb, you are in the middle. You're not as sicko as Kurosh, but you're not like a complete newbie like me. What's your experience with the franchise?
Yeah, I started getting like really core. I'm not saying hardcore, but really core into the Monster Hunter series of Monster Hunter World, as with a lot of people. And the one thing that really stood out when I played Monster Hunter World was just how positive that community is. We just talked about like Kurosh being like the elder statesman of his like crew or whatever. And I remember like posting on Facebook, "Hey, I'm having a hard time with the Monster Hunter World. Like, can someone help me out?" And like someone who I knew was into video games, but like I didn't know how into Monster Hunter he was. When he joined my party, he was just like kicking ass, and I was just like standing off to the side, just watching him just kill the Barath, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I would never have done
Got
this.
boosted.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if this monster is in this game, but it'll fit somewhere. Who knows? Anyway, I played it with a bunch of people at work as well, and I got as far as the Nergigante fight. And I was using the Aloy skin because back then it was like the Horizon Zero Dawn collaboration, and like my main thing was a hammer. I loved watching Aloy eat. Eating is pretty cool in Monster Hunter, by the way. You should totally do it.
Oh my god, yeah.
And yeah, so we get to the Nergigante fight, which is like sort of near the end game, and then when you're playing multiplayer, if you die 3 times, you screw it for everybody. Okay.
The triple cart.
Yeah, and yeah, like we got to a point where we were like this close to clearing Nergigante. It was like limping all over the place, and I needed heals. I had to have my potion, so I hid in the corridor, and then Nergante's tail somehow went through the corridor, and the hitbox actually worked, and I died, and that was where I quit the game because I was so ashamed. And like again, like the 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 community is so positive, but they're like, dude, no, we're not mad. I'm like, I can tell you're mad because we were like 45 minutes into that fight, and it was just so bad. But yeah, anyway, moved on to Rise. Rise is a little bit hardcore in my opinion because it's less about story and more about the hunts. And it also showed that a lot of the core components came back. Like one thing, I'm not sure if you know Miles, but like if you look at the overall map, right, you'll see numbers. Back then in
Yeah.
the handheld days, whenever you walk towards those, the game would stop and it would have to load that. So it really streamlined things as far as like that, and it made things more immersive. And yeah, I'm really enjoying the game so far. I am nowhere near you guys as far as where you're at in the game. Like Kuros World credits, I did not yet. I am 6 hours in. I complained earlier saying these chapters are long. How many chapters are in the game? And so far it's like it's all tutorial. Like everything like prior to the credits is typically tutorial, and I'm having a lot of fun. Like Miles, I am struggling through the controls a little bit. One thing that I had problems with was like catching monsters back then, but I don't have to worry about that right now. But so far the story is pretty cool. I'm having a lot of fun with the webs. They're ruining things for me. But yeah, I'm enjoying it, and look forward to talking to you guys about the game.
Okay, so Kurosh, you're kind of like our lead reviewer here since you
Yeah.
are the main Monster Hunter fan. Um, Tell me like what does this game do like compared to like World or Rise that is kind of better, worse, anything in between?
Sure. I do want to say too that I don't know if we made clear we are all playing on PlayStation. You
Yes.
mentioned the button usage, and that was something I want to make sure we're all on PlayStation. And for what this game is doing, some of the biggest things I see that change immediately in my eyes is how it's handling story. Danreb was talking about. Danreb was talking about how prior games were with sections and regions and everything, and how the story were just. It used to be just like, hey, here's a quest book, do a certain number of the quests, and go for it. Now what it's done is it's very much kind of taken into a modern era of single player and saying, hey, here's a story beat, here's a narrative, build up to one fight, and when you do that fight, hunter rank unlocked to the next one, next story beat, do a thing. And that to me felt like a less waste, like so much falls into tedium, and the story, as you said too, is very tutorial. But it made it feel like the story mattered in a way that it didn't before, and it made it feel like that mode makes more of a significant difference. It made more of like an attention of like, this is an ecosystem, this is a world, this is a narrative. I actually kind of cared. I'm granted I skipped through a lot of the dialogue bits because it just kind of falls into like My Hero-esque anime tropes with a lot of the bits, but for take it or leave it. I think though the big moments you get are felt like really big moments. You have a little monster, but when it gets presented the way it does, that presentation makes it feel like a bigger monster. Um, as opposed to just building up to your like skimming through all that and getting to your later fights on in the game that like have a larger impact and stuff. So that was one of the most immediate things that I saw that was different in this one. And I'd say the other one is just how much it streamlines a lot of the experience for how you do your hunts. Whenever you go on any kind of hunt, the way at which it builds in the quality of life updates of, hey, you got your wish list. Hey, it's always going to be popping whenever you got a material you need. We have guilds and we have squads. You can have multiple of those. Setting up is arduous, but once you get into it and have those systems understood, then it becomes like butter. Everything falls like butter. So um, those are probably the biggest things I think that they did. The single player again is a step in the right direction. I don't think it's on the level of like a Horizon Zero Dawn or other third person narrative RPGs where you're like, oh, there's a lot of more layers to. It's still very much like, hey, go do this, go do that. Here's a trail that we're gonna kind of slowly walk you through, but I appreciate the direction they're taking it. I think that's a positive direction to do it and make it a little bit more meaningful.
Yeah, it's super deep, but not that kind of deep.
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned the single player experience. For those of you who like want to play with friends, but maybe you have bad internet or your friends don't have time or whatever, you can call like an SOS beacon to have NPC hunters join you, and they're usually like characters in the story. So you still kind of get that multiplayer experience
Yeah.
and help because they'll like draw aggro off the monster. They'll
Heal
heal
you.
wounds. They'll heal you, which is helpful for me because, like I mentioned earlier, you have to run around, put your sword away, scroll to the item, and then use it like that. That takes a lot. It's just a really steep learning curve. And so
And
if you go ahead.
to that point of the SOS flare, you can use that at any point, and I still use it. And even if you're using it, other players can then join in later. They just get subbed out.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, just speaking about that point, I really suck at Monster Hunter. I'm not afraid to admit that. As soon as a hunt began in world, I immediately used it. I don't care, whatever.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
whenever someone signed in with a with a name with Japanese characters in it, I was like, we're gonna own this because
You're about to get
Japanese ones are
carried.
so good. It's insane.
Awesome.
One thing that I do want to also mention is in the vein of like how the community and the culture is like there is a difficult like you can make these hunts harder if you want to solo hunt them. You can make them harder. There's no for the uninitiated. There's no like make there's nothing that you're gaining stat point wise that is increasing over time. What's really changing is your skill sets and how you're understanding how the game operates. You can at any point as an old hunter, a new hunter, the only thing you're getting are the better weapons, the better armors that take you. So you can be like, oh, I want to make this hard on myself and just use default armors and everything. Your skill set's really what's going to carry you or how you're operating with the group. And like it just becomes like I just want to join in this hunt, and Myles and I would sit and chat about any like we were for a while doing our own hunts because of some of the PSN network stuff that was happening at the time.
Yeah.
That was a poor timing of cross between those two, but we were still being able to just like have a call and just like play and just hunt on either together or on your own. I think is like where that camaraderie comes. And Danreb, you were mentioning like how hunters are. The mindset is always the goal of a monster hunter is to bring in other people to understand what monster hunter joys are. There's so much that the game is showing you, and we just want to streamline that. Like we're like the Sherpas,
Yeah,
and it's like
there is for anybody the uninitiated, there is no shame in asking for help on a hunt because what happens is the veteran hunters are going to want to do it for what Kurosh mentioned, but they're also doing it for obviously the loot because early on in the game the loot is simple where you want to build armor that is subjugated to the monsters you've killed. But
Yeah.
as it gets more complicated, you're gonna start combining monsters and different kinds of loot, and yeah, you'll want to jump back that way. But that being said, just because like the veteran is in it for the loot doesn't mean you're losing out. Because at the end of the day, like you can't steal loot from another person. It's still going to be available there for you.
Yeah.
Kurosh, you mentioned a little bit about weapons earlier. I kind of want to devote
Oh
a
yeah.
good amount of time to weapons. So, um, Monster Hunter, historically, like it's kind of like colors in Magic, the Gathering, where like you can kind of tie a personality trait to each color. I feel like you can kind of apply that here to weapons as well. So for me, I picked Longsword. That's
Okay.
what I've been playing most of it, and I dabbled a bit with the dual blades, I think.
Yeah.
And like the longsword, I feel like is a really good entry level thing where it's like it's slow and heavy enough, but it's to hit well, but it's also fast enough to where you don't feel clunky, and it just has like strong moves. And you taught me that with a blade, I should just be swinging just straight for any tails, just because
Yeah.
you
If
can
you
like
see if you see a
chop off.
tail, your urge should
Yeah,
be to just cut that thing off
yeah, yeah.
on these monsters.
So yeah, talk to me a bit about like weapons, what's important about them, why you would pick a certain weapon over another, and like how that kind of where the learning curve there is. Because
Sure.
I started at first with the lance,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, I played with it for like 20 minutes, and I hated every second of it. So yeah, talk to me a bit about the weapons.
Yeah, there the amount of weapons, there's quite a lot to choose from. I believe the total list is about 12 to 14, roughly around there. Um I can double check in a sec, but each weapon behaves very differently, and it almost in many ways feels like I'm playing a whole new game every time. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go in now and do those same hunts. Like if I want to go and help a newbie, I'm like, this is an opportunity for me to try a different weapon that I'm not as skilled in, and it's a win-win for both of us. Um, each weapon has a bit of its own personality. The lance, you're very much in the front facing aspects of the monster. You're drawing aggro and you're just chipping away at it. You're trying to cause flinches, you're knocking out. There's roles sometimes associated with some of them. And as they've evolved, the last one, honestly, the last time they introduced weapons was in 4 Ultimate, my favorite one, where they introduced the insect glaive and the charge blade. And each of these weapons again like does so much that's very different, and like you're encouraged to dabble. It's more just how much resources you're gathering further incentivizes you to make all these different things. Like I'm invested in great swords right now. I wanted to. I went back to my one of my bread and butters, which was charge blade and great sword. My great sword's where my roots are. It's slow, it's clunky, but it encourages you to better understand monster movement and behavior, because your whole thing is I have to sit here and charge up a shot, and I need to make it count. So I'm not taking my shots as many times. I'm more so waiting for the right opening and then laying in like 300 damage or 400 damage. Dual blades is like a Wolverine. You're just a berserker barrage. They added some like Attack on Titan esque movement with a lot of what it does. Um, so each one behaves very differently, and you start to see, as you understand the game more, you start to see kind of roles develop. Hunting horn is always a sort of support weapon, but there's an element where it's still very much you can get into the fray and do a good amount of damage on the head of a monster, or just like chop away at it. Ranged weapons are always like an amazing aspect to the game. So each of them does so much. What I love here is two things. This game brings in the ability to, so in Rise they introduced I think in Rise more so than in Worlds, they introduced the mount that you could just traverse through the world through. It's like a wolf that you have. um in this one you have almost like, it's called a secret, I think. Forgive, I don't know the exact pronunciation, but it's essentially it looks like a Weirvin bird that you can mount. I made mine look like a chocobo just because it looks so amazing. um and it goes along with you as well as your palico. So you're riding your secrete, and it has its own like mini pouches that you can store a second weapon on a hunt with, which hasn't been done before. And I was very curious how that would blend into how the game plays, because so much of what you're doing with your armor set, with your build, is I am this role, I'm this weapon. But I've been dabbling with it right now, and I'll start the hunt because I'm like, oh man, I need this piece. And I look at the data and it's like, oh, the info says that's only breakable off the head. But I really want to play with my greatsword and focus on the rest of the tail and the body. So I bring my hunting horn, I beat the crap out of it, the monster's head, knock it out, break the part, and then I get on my mount. I switch to my greatsword. I'm like, all right, let's get to work. And I like that variety. I'm interested to see where it goes forward with how builds go in the end game, and we can get to end game stuff later. But that element of weapon variety is fun because now I'm even more encouraged to either double down on a certain style or try a variety and be like, oh, the group needs this. I have it in my back pocket. I got my second weapon ready to go if the fight needs to switch gears a little bit. The second element is they introduced monsters have always had weak points. Like you were saying, like if you're a longsword user, you're focusing on the tail, dual blades get in on the feet, blunt weapons go for the head. But now they've added a thing where if you can create a wound on the monster, you can then exploit that wound, no matter what weapon you are. And that is such, it has become such a satisfying mechanic in the game that you press, I believe, L2 to identify if any wounds are available. It kind of has like a little bit of a glow to those areas. And then you can do a certain type of move to cause a flinch, to break apart, to do, or just to be badass. Because the dual blade, I think, has hands down the best one. It just does like a Levi, just Beyblade esque move across the whole body. And I love that because it's now just making me want to try every weapon even more. So it's encouraging me just to have more and more of the moment to moment gameplay. At any given turn, I'm like, I want to do it with this weapon. I want to do it with that one. I want to do it, like every weapon has those abilities available to it. So have you, Danreb, I also wanted to know, what is your weapon choices and why? Like what?
Yeah. So, I was similar to Miles, where I started off with a certain weapon, and I was like, I eventually hated it. I believe it was the great sword, and like Kurosh said, it's super clunky. It
Yeah.
was bad. And then I switched to the hammer, which was also clunky, but like, you know, it's really satisfying just going and hitting a monster in the head, and then like, yeah, because the thing that Monster Hunter really lacked for me was like, um, how good it felt to just go ahead and attack things. Like it's not like Zelda where it's like, all right, it turns red automatically, and you know you're doing damage. Where it's like everybody in Monster Hunter is a sponge, and it makes it a little bit less visceral in that regard. So it's cool you mentioned the dual blades because I started using the dual blades in Monster Hunter Rise, and I was like, this game feels completely different now, and that's the case with every weapon. So like, I have a lot of complaints about the game, and we'll talk about it later, but the way that they just make every weapon feel different just makes it feel like a totally great experience every time you play it. And you mentioned the two weapon system, which is new. I didn't know that. I thought it was an end game thing from some other game, and I was like, wow, this can totally make hunts like less annoying because for example, like, you want to hit certain monsters in the head, or you want to get their tail, and not every weapon has that ability. So, depending on your weapon combination, you can go ahead and, you know, um, kill two stones with one bird. Yeah, I said that on purpose. And yeah, like for things like that, and the things like doubling down is great. The wound system, really makes the dual blades insane, as you mentioned. Yeah, it's cool you mentioned Levi. I don't know the Beyblade reference, but the Levi reference totally hit. And yeah, it does make me want to use every single weapon. But just to go back to the dual weapon system, um, Monster Hunter is good at telling you that you can do one thing, but it do a good job at telling you how. And I didn't realize that my second weapon was a gun, and I was like, wait, why do I have a gun? The reason why was I was pressing right to get on my mount instead of up, and it
uh,
changes weapons that way. I was like, why can't I just change my weapon while I'm walking? Oh, because that doesn't make any sense because it's in the pocket of the mount. But yeah, so in doing that, again, it changes the gameplay. When you're using a gun, obviously you want to like stay away from the monster, but you can't be too far away, or else like the ammo won't get there. And yeah, it just changes things drastically. What I didn't know was that. Uh, the wounds kind of play the same. Like I didn't know you could hold L2 uh, with the gun and then specifically target the wound. And yeah, I didn't have as much fun with that as the dual blades, but just being able to combine those two things were pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to seeing how things change. I'm only in the early game, so but it does feel OP right now. But I'm sure it'll get much harder, and I'm both looking forward to it and not looking forward to it at the same time.
One other thing about the weapons is like how cool you look and how good it feels to like do these like special moves. Like uh, with the longsword, for example, there's an attack where you'll like slice and then run up the monster and like do like a grand like ground pound slam. It's cool. It hits hard, and it also helps you kind of like reposition. So there's a lot that like these all these weapons are pretty dynamic, and you just look super badass doing it. It's fun.
Yeah. I was kind of curious, was with the mechanics, like so much. This is what I see, and I wonder if you both experience this. It sounds like some of what Danreb you said is on this note of like what the game is and isn't telling you. So much is learned via another hunter, kind of like, oh, did you know that if you press this at that time, that whole cutscene animation at the end, you can skip it so you can spend more time carving and stuff. Like that was something I learned from another hunter. I didn't learn from the game. And what, like, Myles, what was an experience for you that like that's really stood out as a how was I supposed to know that? Because I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it is
yeah.
something the game
A
still
lot.
struggles with.
There's a lot. So luckily, you and I, we just hop on chat and play, and then I was able to ask you a bunch of questions. One of the big things was your item pouch loadout that you can
Oh,
register what's in your pouch and then save it, right? And there's like 20 slots for that, so you can have uh, loadouts for different situations for a specific monster, a specific hunt, a specific like side quest, whatever. And then you can go back into that menu and click it to like quickly refill those items because you're just re-picking that loadout. I would have never known how to do that if you didn't teach me. Yeah, that is one of the things that I'm. It's a little frustrating with this game is that
I
they,
don't do that just because I'm dumb.
yeah, well, you would have never known how to do it because it does not explain it to you. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on that the game does not teach you at all. The item pouch thing for sure. The weapon swapping, uh, cooking isn't really explained well, but I think that's just a me problem because that's been around for a few games, right?
that's been since the beginning.
Okay, okay, and
Yeah,
then
I will say I'm not a fan of having to take out the barbecue grill. In World, there was a guy you can talk or a palico you can talk to and just choose from a menu. Now it's
Yeah.
like
No,
every
there is.
stuff and oh, is there? Oh, maybe I haven't
Well,
found it yet. I don't know.
no, I think it's a mix. You're right in that there is a guy you can talk to, but there's still a way in which you do it yourself, where it's a recommended or like a menu list.
Yeah,
yep.
I think it's only at certain campsites. So,
okay. Because right now I've just been cooking fish, and I'm like, I want to know
Yeah, I
the
don't really
paper
even know how it
mache
works.
grill, you know?
yeah, yeah.
One other thing that they don't explain, and I didn't even really know it was a thing, and I'm already about to beat the story, is capturing a monster. They don't explain
Oh,
A, that you even can,
I can't.
and B, how to do it. Kurosh, you and I were kind of talking about it before we started the podcast. For someone like me, can you break it down? What is
yeah.
capturing? What's the benefit there, and like how do you do it?
So capturing is whenever if you get to the point where the monster is weak enough, and what typically is the telltale sign of that is as it tries to go from region to region, there's usually like, oh, it's just trying to get away, it's relocating, whatever. But if it starts limping, that's an indicator that it's ready to be captured. It's available to be captured, and so you will have a variety of different equipment that you'll bring with you or be provided to you, and they're like shock traps, pitfall traps, a couple other, there may be a one or two other variety of trap that I don't remember off the top of my head. But what you do is you set those up, or someone in your party does, and when the monster falls in it, you throw tranquilizer bombs on it
Mhm.
to then not like drop them and take them back and study them and stuff. What you gain from that sometimes is additional rewards. It'll like when you go to the reward screen, you'll see like carves usually whatever you card off the monster during the hunt, whatever you broke off during the hunt, and then a reward screen of carves. Captures can net you additional rewards like jewels, gems, and variety of other stuff that may be beneficial. You'd be like, oh, I need just all these resources as you're doing more hunts. It also ends the hunt sooner. You don't have to go through the tail. Like if you were in a situation like you said with Danreb with World, where Nergigante was like weak, but you're like, man, we're struggling. We're like on our last cart. It may be the right call to just be like, we just got to capture. Just someone drop a trap, that kind of thing. Can if it's eligible, because I think most monsters are eligible. Some are just not and you'll learn as you go, but many are.
It was
The
story
thing
based. I'm assuming not.
well, the thing is, the story. I'll say this: they do explain it. It's more of a thing that's explained further into the game, which it does a lot of the additional explanations later on that are like, oh, now you're understanding what other elements of this game are going to be long term. It was treated as one of those.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, like
so
story based in the sense where it's like, all right, you're expected to kill it here, so you can't catch it.
yeah, it's either kill or repel in the story beats, and um, yeah, it is an interesting element of the game. It's one of the many facets, and I feel like to that point of like what it tells you, what it doesn't. It luckily in this case, it's almost like encouraged a whole community around it. There's many famous creators online that make so many guides for these things that people have like built around. Mix sets have become like a ongoing community thing where every week people will share. And what I mean by a mix set is typically when you have an armor set, a full set of that armor will net you a specific types of skill sets that are that you gain. You'll be like, oh, I don't get affected by monster roars, and I don't get stunned, or I have increased attack because that's the nature, the build of this armor set. What many fans, passionate fans, will do is they'll combine things to be like, oh, if you put these combinations with these things, and this has been throughout the series, you'll see like the armor doesn't look great, but these skills that you get are optimal for a longsword user looking to do X, Y, and Z, or a sword and shield user doing whatever. And that is a fun in its own right. Like you're like, oh, I want to chase that, I want to build that. The cool thing here, and I think it did it in World, they started to finally introduce transmog. Um, and it because so much of this game, it's such a beautiful game. Like we haven't talked too much about the visuals, but I think it took everything that World did and just like refined it. I've been playing like the PlayStation does performance or visual mode. I'm at 60 frames. I haven't had any hitches whatsoever. um yeah, so great. Yeah, Danner.
I just want to circle back on what Miles was talking about in regards to learning things that you didn't know what to do and whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, like a lot of our hype with Monster Hunter Wilds was when I was sitting with him at Summer Game Fest, watching the guided demo, and he was seeing me pop off over certain things, and I'm sure it's like it's cool seeing it on screen, but like until you play it, you can't really appreciate what you're watching, and that part in actually ended up being really early in the game, and I'm sure Miles remembers that. Like, did you feel like you were at that level, or you felt like, all right, I just went to the demo spot and I sucked?
Um, I, I don't quite understand your question. What are you
So
asking?
like if you remember in the demo, like
Yeah,
the guy was like um breaking trees to make sure that the
yeah.
monsters were hitting them, and all of these things that were actually just cutscene stuff. But he was also like doing all of these like moves that like were impressing me just because I knew that
Mm-hmm.
they were hard to do depending on what weapon you had. I was wondering if you had those moments as well as you were playing it, and then comparing it to your experience when you saw people hype it or when you watch trailers and that. And now that you've played Monster Hunter,
Yeah.
like what's your appreciation of it now?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, we got to see it behind closed doors at SGF, and yeah, I was floored by it. I was like, I can't wait to play this. But yeah, when I got to that fight in my time with the game that we saw during the hands-on, I definitely felt as badass as it looked then. Like, you know, pulling down a branch to like wound it, and then jumping on his back to like slice at his head and stuff, and just dodging and attacking. I feel like no matter your build, your play style, which weapon you pick, you're still gonna feel badass and like a strong monster hunter. That's definitely how I feel. felt about it. As far as my appreciation for it now, I wish I had started playing this franchise years ago, because I definitely see where the hype is from. I see why it has like such a deep cult following now. Yeah, like I said, like I'm not like a live service guy really. I like when games end, but I can see myself coming back to this long term. Like when the game is out, I have friends and my brother who are like extremely interested. Like I will definitely jump back in and play, just because um, story isn't really like a focal point here. Where like yeah, it's good, but it's not really why most people are here. So it's really easy to just grab and pick up and play again. After a month or so away. But no, I'm very happy with this game. A lot of
Do,
quality of life stuff that they could improve, but no, it's great.
I want to ask you both, and I have some thoughts on this too. Of we all have either been familiar with it, have some history with it, but do you think to someone who's never played Monster Hunter before or knows anything about it, like is this game like good for like a
Yeah,
good entry point for them there, or what do you think?
I think that depends on their. It's gonna sound so lame. I think it depends on their like level as a gamer and like how hardcore of a gamer they are. What I mean by that is like how quickly are you able to grasp complex like mechanics and controls. Because I do think that might be the strongest barrier to entry is learning that. Because if you're not already pre-exposed to it from playing all the old games, the learning curve is the thing for me that was like very frustrating for the first like 5 hours or so. Um, I if I had to give a yes or no answer, honestly, I don't think it's too newcomer friendly if you're not like a hardcore video game player like us.
Yeah.
But for someone like me who plays a ton of games, like yeah, this is my first Monster Hunter, but I'm familiar with how mechanics work and I'm able to learn that. As a casual player, I honestly don't think it's super accessible unless you really have the time and drive for it.
Darren, what do you think?
Yeah, it's weird for me because I'm experienced now, right?
Yeah.
And the part that's weird for me to say is that so far from what I've played in the 6 hours that I've played, it's feeling easy. I'm gonna regret that later,
Yeah, I
but
was gonna say
you
just
know,
wait.
that being said, like I think part of it is your weapon choice.
Yeah.
Dual blades. I'm not saying they're OP, but they definitely make it more approachable, especially if you're not a Soulsborne kind of person.
Yeah.
Because someone, another reviewer talked about it with this a while ago. It makes you feel like you're playing Ninja Gaiden, whereas others are playing, Dark Souls, and that really matters because just the fact that weapons and armor just change the way you play, and like I keep saying that, but it's totally the truth. It just changes everything, and if you do, if you switch to the Great Sword, which a lot of people are going to think is a good introductory weapon, um, you know, it's also really really slow, and people don't like that. People want fast paced action and things like that. Um, like you have a great sword, but you don't feel like Cloud. What's the point of even having it? So yeah, there's that in that regard. I do want to say though that in regards to weapon choice, there is a recommendation system. I don't know if that actually helps, but because they only ask you two questions and compare. But it does give you a bit of a guide as to like what there is to use, and
Yeah.
that definitely helps in that regard. But yeah, as far as its approachability, there's that. I do think it's on the easier side for now. But yeah, I do think this is definitely a great way to start as long as you realize that every weapon is different, and you have to be open minded enough to go ahead and make the switch if you aren't feeling it. If you've tried like four weapons and you still hate it, then you'll hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with so much of what you're saying. I think or both of you are saying, I think it's for those that are familiar, like go in knowing there's a high learning curve, go in knowing it's a complex, there's a lot of multifaceted aspects to the game. And if you're willing and able and interested in trying, the investment will pay off. The time you put in will come back and you'll see a return on that. But for someone who's just looking for something a little bit more easy in terms of like jumping in and just going straight to play, in that way of that ease of entry, I don't think it's there quite yet. And that's my biggest criticism is that it's not necessarily doing anything in this game that's worse than prior ones, but it's not doing anything in that element of making it dramatically better. In both just experiencing the game and also experiencing multiplayer. I feel like they've expanded the multiplayer in a way, this one, to go into an element of this, of now your hub can be more than just like 8 or so people. You can go up to 50 or 100, which is makes it feel like more like a live service game. But to get to that point, it feels, and to do it in an intentional way, to be like, okay, Myles, Danreb, you and I, all three of us need to join this, and then when we join that, then we join this, and then when we join that, then I'll post this, and then you should see something pop up on the screen, and I'm like, that's, I mean, I would like it to streamline that in some fashion, in a better way. The best way, honestly, is like, and if this is really, if you're lucky, is like if you have a passionate friend that loves the series and they're your guide. Like I was more than excited when like Miles was like, okay, let's get together and like show me some of the things as I'm figuring it out as well. I was like, oh, perfect. Like this is exactly what I want to do. But for just someone who's trying to do their own thing, just going knowing there is a steep learning curve, there
Yeah.
is, but that investment does get paid off.
Yeah, if I didn't have you to help me and like teach me a ton of stuff, like I would, all would be doing is hunting, crafting, hunting, crafting. There's so much more to it than that.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
so that helps.
we've talked a lot about the steep learning curve, but
Yeah.
maybe just specifically for Miles, what makes it uh, difficult for you? Because what makes it difficult for me is I think this game, and it's the same problem every entry. The UI is terrible, and
That's I was just about to say that.
I have no like way to actually say how I'd make it better, which is lame for me to say because it
Okay.
works, and that's why it has millions of fans. But everything from the scrolling thing on the bottom right to the wheel, I'm like, we have to have both of these things, and then you can't pause it because it's a live game. So I'm like, okay, this is just rough.
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. The UI and the menu system is awful. One thing that's weird is that you can get to, um, well, maybe this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't explain anything. You can get to like one screen from multiple different menu options. I don't really understand the point in that, but I agree. Like, for example, your square button, you can map that to have like a mantle or a potion or like a seed or whatever. You hold L1 and then hit square and circle to cycle through it. I Now that I'm used to it, it's muscle memory and it's fine. I know how to use it. And what you can also do is hop on your mount and he'll run away for you, so you don't have to multitask there. Um, that is complicated. The You can also, while holding L1, use the right stick to cycle through other menus too, which like I appreciate that is there, because like you mentioned, it's an online game. You can't pause it, pick, and then be done. Well, if you're playing offline, you actually can pause. You have to hit start and then find the option that says pause game. So it's just a whole
Yeah,
bunch.
it's like online single player because they added a photo mode that you can only do in
Yes,
that mode,
yeah,
and
exactly.
that's where you can get it. But
But yeah,
how do you
like
get there is you have to go through submit.
yeah, yeah.
You meant options, right? Because it's 2025. There's no more start button.
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly,
yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the menus are weird. Like I mentioned earlier about the item pouch loadouts, getting to that screen, you have to go to the tent, and then you have to cycle through it. And then to this day, I don't know how to change my pouch to register it as a new one. I only have the one pouch registered that Kurosh helped me with. I don't know how to change what's in my loadout. I
I
just
got
know how
50
to.
mushrooms. All right.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it. And again, it's one of those things like once you do it enough time, like it's fine. But like,
It's an interesting design problem, a game design challenge, because
yeah,
it is such a complex game and it's very rewarding in that complexity once you understand it. Almost feel like the way in which I approach a editing tool or like a photo Adobe, it's like here's 1,000 tools at my disposal. How do like where do I begin? Where do I start?
yeah. Um,
Um Having got like elements of it is like, do they make it more not shallow but like do they remove a lot of that in order to get rid of it, or how do they streamline? I don't, Dana, like you said, I also don't know how they solve this problem. I just am like, let me help those that are struggling to figure out the problem.
Like
I
something
wonder
I
if
say is
they.
that criticism is invalid until you find out how to fix it, and I don't know how to
Yeah,
fix
that's a
it.
good point. I wonder if they designed the like the combat UI with PC in mind, because I feel like it'd be a lot easier to mess with that with the keyboard, whereas on a really
It's
is it?
I've talked to a few friends who are PC players, and they're like, I grab my controller the second I can, because
Oh,
there's
interesting.
just, it's such an intuitive. It now so more so, because on the old school, on the PSP, I don't know if you guys are familiar from other games, but the claw like
Yeah,
grab
you have to
method,
grab
like
it all
you
weird.
didn't
Yeah.
have two analog sticks, so you had to like cycle through the menus using the shoulder pads while you're holding square, but you're also like, where is this monster so I don't die? So you're running, and you're like, okay, cycle, 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 run, jump, and hand stretches and PT was necessary in order to manage them. But now that you have multiple options on the controller, and it just feels like it's all kind of there. There may be people that have like really streamlined the hotkeys on computer, but everyone I've asked that plays on PC is like, I just grab a controller and hook it up the second I can.
Did the Vita versions use the back panel touch thing?
I think you could, but the Vita had the two sticks, I believe.
That's a good point.
Yes. Yeah.
But by that point, they were on 3DS. They weren't on Vita.
Okay.
Well, they were on PSP. Then they moved to 3DS, or to 3DS with
Capcom
Tri Ultimate and Forward, and that one also, when they introduced the 3DS with the little nub,
Mhm.
that was a game changer, because that was like your second analog stick. I was like, give me that little new 3DS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
Danreb, you're
when I
playing
was
this
joking
with
around with you
a.
guys via our personal chat, I was like, I have a dual sense edge. I wonder if I can like map these things. I
That's what I was
haven't
gonna
tried it, but
ask.
I'm
Has
like,
it? So you haven't tried yet. So
no.
that's what I was gonna ask you. Like, if that would make it any better.
Yeah, I don't know.
I The little bit Miles and I messed around with it, there's different mapping setups that it has pre-built, but I didn't see if there's any actual like in-depth custom button mapping. And I agree. I think that would be a great thing to add.
Especially with the extra buttons, right? So
Yeah,
I want to pivot a little bit.
sure.
So we're all playing on PS5. Danreb, you're on PS5 Pro. Is that
no,
right?
PS5
Or no?
Slim.
Okay, okay. Well, none of us have a pro, but
Mhm.
I still want to talk about like the visuals and the performance.
Yes.
I think it's beautiful.
Okay.
The open world looks great. The cutscenes look smooth, but like the in-game models, like as you're walking around, don't look as nice as they do in cutscenes. What do you guys think?
One
I
thing
think
there was the betas were very concerning to me, because in the beta, both the betas, it was much choppier and much not as smooth on a lot of the just in world, because this game builds off of world in the environmental stuff, which we I wanted to just point to, of in this vein of visuals. Any section you go, a thunderstorm could be starting, a wind, violent winds could be going, all kinds of crazy weather aspects. And I remember when I was doing the betas, it was constantly like, whenever it got to those high intensity moments, there was elements that got a little choppy or laggy. I was like, oh, is this going to be like kind of something to expect, and just kind of temper my expectations? But ever since we've been doing our thing, every element in the game, I was like, oh, this looks smooth, this looks buttery, this looks great. I haven't dropped frames ever for me. Sorry, Dana, you were gonna also add to that?
Yeah. You guys are both playing on performance mode, I'm assuming. Yeah.
I am.
Yeah, I'm actually not that big a fan of the way the game looks, and like even in action. I don't know. A lot of things look really grainy to me. My biggest complaint is that it has the, at least from what I've played, it has the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet draw distance problem, where you're seeing like some of the live enemies like move at 15 frames per second, or not
Oh,
enemies,
really?
I actually have noticed that too.
non-moving
Yeah,
things, and I'm
yeah.
like, you look like the Pokemon windmill, and I don't like that. And that was a lot of the same issues that plagued the Switch version. But at the same time, while it all visually looks awkward, it's really snappy. This is probably like the best playing
Sure.
Monster Hunter I've played, and that's probably because I'm playing on performance mode. But I'm kind of like tempted to switch to resolution to see if that actually changes anything. I doubt
Yeah.
it will, but like I feel like it's different. Or Myles, when we were sitting at Summer Game Fest, I feel like that build of the game looked better than what we have now. The
I
cutscenes are
I could see
also like,
that.
they're fine, but they do feel a little grainy. I don't know if that's just a visual style, but it doesn't look that much better than Monster Hunter World or even Rise for me. To me, it looks more of the same, and I expected more in that regard. Like for example, the character models, not the monsters, but the characters, they're pretty. They're shinier than they have to be, and I feel like shiny
Mm,
stuff was
mhm.
more of a thing from 2 generations ago that we should have like already gotten past. And like, yeah, like the funny thing is I'm complaining about these things, and I'm not a graphics guy. I play Nintendo games, so like the fact that I'm bringing this up means I guess I'm a little disappointed with what I'm seeing with the visual fidelity of the PS5 and whatever we have.
For the
That
character
being said,
models, oh,
I,
good.
I will say that as go just talking about looks with gameplay, while I'm like actually fighting a monster, everything looks perfect. It's when I'm back in the hub where I start to get a little annoyed with
Mhm.
what I'm looking at.
100% agree with you there. I think where what I was really speaking to was the way the monsters are, the way they look, the
Yeah,
way the fight.
those are perfect, absolutely, in my opinion. So
I think one of the early monsters has elements to it where it just drops things throughout the area, and it's just constant like an added aesthetic to the map. Um, the models, I always and I agree with you on that point, but I for some reason in my head I was like, this is I believe Capcom's like engine, and I remember seeing a lot of those same sort of models in some of the Resident Evil games
mhm.
and some of those. So I was like, okay, this is just they need to maybe revamp their engine in some fashion, and
Yeah,
I'm
I've
excited
never
for when that.
played any of the Resident Evil games, but from all the trailers I've seen, they've always looked perfect. But also, those are trailers, so
Are either or have either of you played this on a Portal yet? On a PlayStation Portal? Do,
A
do
little
either of you
bit.
have one?
absolutely
Okay.
not gonna do
How
that.
did it feel?
It felt good. Controls are solid. It's really connection dependent. Again,
Sure.
it's being an online game, so that's where your mileage will vary. I've noticed that same with any other multiplayer games I'm playing on there. So as long as you're on a decent connection or a solid connection, you should be okay. But I haven't messed with it too much. I've just been like wanting to experience this on my big screen, and just whenever I'm playing, I guess where it's a time investment, so I'm not playing on the go too often quite yet. Maybe later in the year where I'm like on travel or something, I would definitely take the portal with me to get some hunts in if I wanted to. But right now, it's just been like I want to be just on my couch, TV on, full game mode going, type of setup. So
Yeah, just quickly on that note, as far as approachability, a lot of these hunts can take anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes. So this game is great in short spurts.
yeah.
Like even though I am like way behind Kurosh and Myles, playing through the story, I'm like I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. So
The other thing to touch on with the story elements, and one thing we were trying to figure out, and I think I have a better understanding of now, is you can make joint story progression,
yes,
but there's certain criteria that it needs, and this is where the streamlining I feel like could have been better. Is once you go through the cutscenes, then it'll say like quest begins. Then you could make that quest, if you're in the same party, can then be joinable from someone else. You can't join someone's hunt who's further than you, but you can join someone's hunt who's at the same level or lower
makes sense.
in storms of progression, and it'll count for both of you,
Mm.
which I appreciate. But again, setting that up and the way in which you have to wait for those requirements is kind of it's like a how do you, I don't know how to solve it because it does have your character model actively engaged in those cutscenes, and you have moments of dialogue. So I understand why some of those constraints came up, but yeah, just on the story beats, and it's crossplay. So I'm very like there's no wait for later points of adding crossplay. It's out the gate. You can PC, Xbox, PlayStation can all play together, which I appreciate.
Switch to
Switch to
Man, that network, I don't
right,
know. I don't know if I'm gonna.
right, yeah. Okay, so since we're nearing the end here, I just do want to be able to touch on like the end game experience. Kurosh, you're already there. You're like 20 hours past credits.
Yeah,
What's the end game experience like? We know Hunter Rink is back.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's been a
what's
thing. I
what
would
is
say
and,
talking within the realm that I can speak to it, there is existing systems that I think are familiar, and it does it in a way where there's a good pacing. And again, I can't go too much into detail on it, but I will say that the things I this game does that it brings back some of my favorite elements of prior games and makes them streamlined here, I think is one of the biggest hooks for me as to why I'm enjoying this game so much and will continue to enjoy this game. It has elements that I feel like are going to last in the end game, and I think also again with the cadence that World had, they've already announced, I believe, at the PlayStation State of Play, they were announcing the first edition. Mitsuni is an older monster that's been brought back. That is like a cadence of this game of, hey, we're going to give you some more monsters to hunt, we're going to give you more difficulties, we're going to give you more things like that. And everything they've said in their conversations of this game and in the way that they want to approach it follows that track. I'm very excited, and I was talking with some of the other reviewers about what collabs they're going to do. Danreb, you mentioned Aloy
yeah.
was one that they've done. I would love Final Fantasy VII to get a collab here. Buster Sword, Great Sword, Sephiroth Longsword, Tifa Dual Blades, maybe Barrett Heavy Bowgun, Aerith. Like they could do the whole suite, and people would lose their mind over it. And Capcom's always done a good job. Like they've done Street Fighter in the past with other Capcom properties, Devil May Cry, other PlayStation properties. I just hope that they can do collabs and fun stuff long term, and I think they will. I think this game's got legs. It's going to be one of the multiplayer games of this year that I think
Yeah.
is going to be in the conversation.
So you're not really allowed to go too much into specifics, but for someone like me who hasn't
Mm-hmm.
really played Monster Hunter, especially towards the end game, if you can give me like a basic breakdown of like the gameplay loop here, like for somebody who doesn't really understand how these games work, once you roll credits, like that's really when the game starts. What's the end game loop like?
Usually, yeah, good. Thank you. That's a good way of phrasing it. So much of the history of the game is where you can look at a lot of it too, and it's now you can hunt a lot of the more dangerous versions of monsters, and you can chase the more powerful. There's the power chase, much like Diablo or much like Destiny or much like any live service kind of game. There's a power chase that you're trying to go for, and a style aspect to it. There's fashion hunters always out there, and you're like, oh, that stuff is usually I got to chase the side quests. I got to do this higher tier quest. The hunter rank is never indicative of your skill or your power. It's more so just your experience. It's like I have played this much of this game. That's really all it's really highlighting. But what it does is it opens up access to more hunts and more things. The end game elements of what you can do with gear open up in a larger way that I think is fun, and that's something that's always a part of the fun of end game is I just want to do more hunts and chase the things, and you'll usually chase after gems, different things to make your builds just more fun, and like so that when you go into the game and do a hunt with a friend, maybe it's their first time or they're earlier on in the story, you go in and you're like, now it's fun. It like I have a new way to make this fun for me. I'm chasing another build. I'm chasing another weapon, what have you.
Awesome. So we're at the hour mark right now. Any closing thoughts? Oh, you know what? What I would like you to do, just kind of like break down, reiterate what you like and what you don't like, and then we can sign off after that. Dan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I already talked about it. I like how sort of approachable it is. Everything that I'm playing through right now, it's giving me the vibes of like, all right, maybe you can get to the ending this time. And like in our guide here, which you guys can't see, one of the questions is, would you keep playing after this review? Why or why not?
Mm.
I think it's a really good question, just because like of the time that we guys have. The reason why I'm behind is because I'm playing other games on embargo, and I
Yeah,
want to
same.
focus on that. But like, I really want this to be the game that I roll credits on. You know, Who knows if I'm going to play it after? I probably will, but I said that about Iceborne and I never touched it. So yeah, there's that. But yeah, as far as what I like, I feel like the hunts are way more visceral. I am enjoying the story, no matter how simple it is. Um, I haven't played with you guys yet, so I do eventually want to get that in before
Yes.
before I call it quits. But yeah, this is definitely great. I'm enjoying it. As for like what I don't like, as I mentioned, I feel like the visuals could use a little bit more polish. Like I'm gonna say it here. I like the way Rise looks more than I like this. I know that's gonna be a hot take, but I think like the style really lent itself well to the Switch. I've never played the upgraded PS4 or 5 version, whatever it may be. And another thing that I don't like, and maybe it'll grow as I get further, is I thought it would be like more open. You know, when I
Mm.
saw the trailers, they were like, oh yeah, they'll go ahead and kill your camps and whatever it may be. And like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that hasn't happened for me yet, and I'm sure when it happens, when it does happen, it'll be like,
It
wow,
happens way too often.
way
I
too
don't
long.
think
My
I don't think you've
well,
unlocked camps yet.
no, so like what you'll have fast travel points in the map, and I don't want to detract from your closing thoughts
Sure,
here too
sure,
much, but
no worries.
there's certain ones that are indicated as safe, very dangerous,
Yes,
kind of
yes,
dangerous,
I'm
and
not.
there's one that I constantly need to go back to, and every time it'll pop up and say this monster just wrecked your thing, and I'll have just traveled there, and I see it just looking at it, and it just bashes it. I'm like, again. But it encourages me to hunt that monster, and the gameplay loop goes.
Yeah.
Great design.
Aside from hopefully rolling credits, I'm hoping I run into an Anjanath or a Basil Geese. Shout out to Monster Hunter Stories 2 for actually letting me learn how to pronounce that name. But yeah,
Right on. Kurosh, closing thoughts. What do you like? What you don't like? What's something that you want to say that you haven't had the chance to yet in this hour?
I love this series. I love what it brings people together for. I love the community aspect of it, and I think this game does that in spades. It's I wish that they are, and I hope that they solve the problems that make the steep learning curve as arduous or as daunting or overwhelming and intimidating for many newcomers. I think that is a problem that still challenges this series. But I want to keep emphasizing that there is an investment that you get rewarded on when you do put that time in, and it's a great community. It's a great game. This game takes so much of what World did, refines it, brings it all together. The way in which World that I didn't talk to earlier of just monsters. There's the monster you're always hunting, but then there's other monsters in the environments that could clash. They just exist, and like this one, I think even more so once you're kind of like in those the regions. I'm just trying to beeline, and the auto pathing is a big help in this way. I'm just trying to beeline to, let's say, a given monster, and I cross by 4 different other monsters that just roam in the area. And at any given time of day, that will change. There is a behavior pattern to a region. It says, "Oh, these monsters are more likely to appear at this time of day or night," and it makes it feel like a much more lived-in world that I'm entering in, and I love that it's taken me further and advanced that a bit while still bringing back some of my favorite elements of the older games. If you got a chance to play it, if you've ever been curious, try it, give it a shot. Take the time to understand that conversation of weapon choice is I think more important of how much you'll bounce off this game as opposed to the menu complexities. Because if you don't feel a weapon, it'll very much, I think, be a big deterrent for you. And just try the other weapons, understand what you enjoy, understand what these weapons can do. There's tons of guides on it. Love this game. I will be playing this long after. I have friends that I want to play with. I have you guys I want to play with. It's such a more fun experience when you got buddies and you're just chilling and hanging
Yeah.
out, hunting stuff, and you're like, what do you want to chase?
Yeah, you touched on a lot of like what I don't like, just being the steep learning curve and the menus and stuff. Which like that's more so of like a time thing. Once you can put the time in, it becomes not that bad. But yeah, the main thing I don't like here is just that the barrier to entry for new players who have never played a game like this is kind of high. But once you get there, it's so much fun. Hunting monsters feels really tactile. It's really dynamic. It's a blast. And yeah, playing with friends too is just a fantastic experience. So, um, I believe I'm one hunt away from rolling credits. So I'll probably do that once we sign off here, and then yeah, that's our Monster Hunter Wilds review. Please check back on the site for Kurosh's written review, which I assume will just kind of be all these thoughts that we said, but on paper, with a video companion as well, narrated as well by you. We do want to try to start live streaming. The only issue there is just time. So once the game is out to the public, we'll probably try to live stream the game. I would love to do that. Go ahead, Kurosh.
Also, to that point of the community in our community at Temple of Geek,
Yes.
there's a Discord. We always encourage you to be a part of a Discord for conversations, for everything. But also, we made sure to get a. There's squads you can make in this that you can find. Is if you join a squad, you can find all the players on it, and you can make friends and stuff. We made one for Temple of Geek, and that'll be available. It's open to all of our readers and viewers and fans. So we'll be sure to share that as well in our Discord. So be sure to check that out.
Yes,
And
thank you for bringing that up. Thank you. I
yeah,
totally forgot about that. Yeah, so yeah, squad's kind of just like a clan, like it's like an LFG thing, and like just more social hub. Which, speaking of the squads, is also hard to find. There's only one spot on the map to access that menu, so
yeah.
that's kind of annoying.
I wanted
Um,
to mention this, while we were going at service with the review, but like this is the first game where I really didn't care about how to really make my character look like me. For
yeah,
those of you who are wrestling fans, I tried to make him look like Jacob Fatu, and one thing that absolutely drove me nuts, and this is the case with almost every live service or RPG I've played, is that once you have your gear and all that, when they engage in conversation, they're still wearing that gear. But when you're eating, then they take it off. So I'm like, why did I spend an hour, creating my character, and all of a sudden it doesn't matter? So
You can change. No, you can change that because I was annoyed with that too, and I was like, just make my face visible,
yeah.
and it lets you do that. So all of the cutscenes will have that.
Oh, is that a setting?
It's yeah. I'll show you the setting again. Same point. It's hard to find, but it does exist.
yeah.
It does exist.
It's too bad I just can't super kick everyone in the face, But otherwise, like,
That might be a feature. That might be a dance you get later because they always have fun little like group dances you can do and comms and stuff. So
yeah, a lot of cool social aspects. Okay, that's our Monster Hunter Wilds review. Please check back on our site for more video game coverage. I will be reviewing Avowed. I got my code a couple days ago. The game comes out on February 18th, so my review is going to be a bit late just because it's going to be a big-ish game. I also have a preview coming soon that's embargo that I need to get back to work on because the embargo's up on the 19th. And we're just waiting on codes for a couple other games. Do you guys have anything else that you'd like to plug, whether on Temple of Geek or otherwise? Kurosh, I know you have a big project coming up. I don't know if you're going to talk about that at all.
I'm working on this stuff. I'm gonna be doing some coverage of. There's a game that's been in the demo's out now and it'll be releasing soon. But I'm gonna be talking about Ruffy in the Riverside. Really cool, old school
I
platformer.
downloaded that on my Steam Deck, man. I can't wait.
It's
Yeah.
so good. I can't wait to talk more about it, and I'm gonna hopefully have an interview with one of the developers for it up too. And the other thing I'll say, I won't share too much, but please, WonderCon is coming around in Anaheim, California. If you're in the area, please make sure to attend. You will see us there in some capacity, and so that's going to be exciting.
Details to come. Details to come. All right. So yeah, you can find Temple
And
of Geek
Danreb,
online. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, Danner, go ahead.
Uh,
I don't know if you had a last point.
Did you see my thing in the chat?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, please
Yeah.
do. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, so those of you that don't know, I am also the head of content of SmashPad.com. And, as I mentioned, like, I've been busy with other games, and I've already reviewed two of them. I have a review for The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak 2. And yeah, that was the main thing. I have like over 80 hours in that, so that's why I was already behind. I also have a review of Afterlove EP. That's an indie game, and that was the last project from Mohammed Fahmy, who is responsible for games like Coffee Talk and A Space for the Unbound and plenty of those other games. And that game is actually or that review is actually doing really well because I ended up getting retweeted by a bunch of developers from different studios, and that's cool to see, especially in regards to things like representation in Asian games media and whatever it may be. So really proud of that. And yeah, I also have a lot of reviews coming up there as well. And looking forward to talking about all that. And yeah,
Exciting.
Yes. And then Danreb and I are approved for GDC. Neither of us are 100% sure we're going to make it, but if
we're going to
so,
make it, but I don't know about all 5 days. That's the hard
yeah,
part.
yeah, exactly. All right. So let's do one quick plug here for all of your social accounts. You can find Temple of Geek at Temple of Geek pretty much anywhere. You can find me at Myles Obenza. That's Miles with a Y. On Instagram and Blue Sky. I don't really use my Twitter anymore. Danreb, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at DanrebV on Twitter and Blue Sky, but I am cooler on LinkedIn. Just look for my name, Danreb Victorio, and a lot of my cooler content's on there.
Can confirm it
It's
is way cooler.
appropriate too.
Yeah. You can find me at Cujo Prime on everything. I on YouTube and on all the socials and stuff. So
Awesome. Thank you for listening. Now let's go hunt some more monsters.
yeah.